What is up, and welcome into the block. I've got my guys, Reed, Blake Brockermeyer, here ready to talk some college ball. We are getting ready to get to fall camp. The 2022 season is right around the corner. We're going to talk about the cusp of that starting. But before we do that, you at home, like, share, subscribe, continue to get us out there, build up this YouTube channel, and build up the block from the ground up as we get towards the 2022 season. Like I mentioned, gentlemen, fall camp, it's coming up soon. A lot of teams gearing up to prepare for this season. A lot of question marks, but new faces to address those questions, incoming transfers you're keeping an eye on as we get into fall camp. I want to go to you first, Blake, because you're headed out to Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. Transfer portal you, if you will.
Yeah, transfer portal U got some dudes for sure this year. I love what they're doing in the transfer portal. I remember looking through their recruiting class, looking at it going, what is going on at Ole Miss? They just had a great year, and Lane Kiffin had a plan, and he brought in some great players. Michael Trigg is a guy that I've got my eye on. His numbers at USC last year were not great, but I've heard nothing but incredible things about him and what a mismatch he's going to create in Lane Kiffin's offense. I expect them to run the ball a little bit more than they did last year. They've got some incredible backs, a really good offensive line, some weapons on at wide receiver, of course. But Trigg is a guy that they haven't, is kind of a mismatch guy in the middle of the field they haven't had. He can stretch the middle of the field. He can make the tough catches that, you know, to move the chains. And I really think he can make a really big impact for them. They've got a tough schedule, of course, in the SEC West, but I've got my eyes on him as a guy that's going to really do some damage in Lane Kiffin's offense.
Like, I think you're right on that. I think Lane Kiffin is probably the best guy in the country, at least one of them, at exploiting those matchups and getting guys like that the ball in all kind of creative ways. So I am pretty excited about seeing how that situation works out at Ole Miss.
I do want to add too, guys, I was helping out Clint Brewster, who does our transfer portal rankings. And I remember being in our meeting ranking these guys, and Michael Trigg was someone that we shot up from like the 140s to the top 15, especially after that spring game performance, Blake. Really excited about what he could be as a mismatch nightmare within that offense. I'm excited to see what Lane Kiffin does with him for the Ole Miss Rebels. Carl, what are you looking at when we talk about transfer portal players in 2022?
I'm looking at Jack Abraham, transfer quarterback from Southern Miss to the University of Missouri. Mizzou lost Connor Bazelak last year, transferred to Indiana. Brady Cook, the incumbent, started the bowl game against Army and played really solid. But Army is not the SEC. So I'm interested to see how this battle turns out when you bring in an experienced guy like Abraham. Does Brady Cook hold him off and keep the job, or does Abraham and his experience overtake him? The University of Missouri has a great group of receivers led by incoming freshman Luther Burden and returning sophomore Dominic Lovett. So there's some talent there, some young, talented receivers in Missouri. I want to see who is going to be throwing those guys the ball. I'm looking closely to the quarterback battle as the season and camp progresses.
Yeah, it's a huge battle for Missouri. And I think if you really look at Missouri and their schedule, and they've kind of they're kind of under the radar in the SEC East, I think. I look at their schedule, and if they can, you know, maximize and hit on all cylinders, I wouldn't be surprised if they had a few upsets this year in the East, because they've got some talent, maybe guys that people aren't really talking about. But the quarterback position is going to be critical, as it is for every team in college football.
The transfer portal gives as much as it takes. Connor Bazelak out. Now the Missouri Tigers need this guy and Jack Abraham to pan out for them as they try and figure out that young quarterback room. I want to talk about a transfer, but somewhat of a delayed transfer, gentlemen. We know Arik Gilbert is getting ready to finally play for the Georgia Bulldogs, and we got a glimpse of it in the spring game for the Bulldogs. It was pretty special. I'm not going to lie. A lot of people were buzzing about what he did, but the aftermath is what's really caught my attention. We know the talent that he is on paper, but all of his teammates and coaches are saying that Arik Gilbert has capitalized on the summer conditioning program and is getting ready to potentially have a massive season in an intriguing Georgia offense. And if all of this is true, I am in what's about to happen next mode when we talk about one of the more talented tight ends we have in college football, again, on paper. But it's a prove-it season, Blake, for a guy in Arik Gilbert.
Yeah, Georgia's offense this year, I think, is going to be a lot different than last year. I think last year their defense was so elite that they just, they were solid. They wanted to move the chains and score, but they weren't trying to do anything stupid on offense where they could lose a game. This year, I can see them stretching the field a lot more. They've got some incredible matchups at tight end. They've got three guys that are a lot different than most teams in college football have, and they've got some really good returning receivers coming back to go along with a fairly veteran offensive line and some good running backs, and Stetson Bennett returned. So I think Gilbert is a guy that will be a chess piece for them, that he can stretch the field as a wide receiver. He's got some Kyle Pitts in him, where I think he is kind of that hybrid guy that can put his play in the slot and also be able to run past guys. So Georgia will maximize their matchups and their tight end. Brock Bowers, of course, is tight end number one in the country, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Georgia looks like week one against a really good Oregon team that's going to know them fairly well.
There's no position in football that has the matchup capabilities as the tight end position. If you have great tight end play, you give yourself some incredible mismatches against the defense. Do guys load the box up because those guys can be adequate blockers and help in the run game, or do they give you the box because of the fear of their receiving ability? When you already have the number one tight end in football in Bowers, and you add the skill of Gilbert, who is similar to the skill set that Kyle Pitts had, who can stretch the field and catch it in the middle of the field and do some things vertically as well, it really gives Georgia a formidable group. And I think that it might be an unstoppable force for them as the season progresses offensively. Stetson Bennett is going to have some toys to play with. And like Blake, I expect for Georgia to really ratchet it up a little bit on offense this year. Man, that's a hell of a problem for defensives to have to see those tight ends that they have.
Yeah, it forces you to bring in basically another safety. You've got to bring in a hybrid guy that's big enough and physical enough to play in the box and stop the run. But you also got to bring in a guy that's tall enough and athletic enough that can run with a receiver. For them, it's a tight end, but it's basically the same thing. So it's a nightmare for defenses. I know that seems to be the popular thing, is to bring in kind of a big nickel guy to cover these tight ends. But if you've got two of them, then that creates a whole different kind of matchup. And Georgia's got actually three. So it'll be fun to watch this year in Athens.
I don't know how many teams can claim they can throw out a 3 tight end set and still claim a wide open playbook. But Darnell Washington, Brock Bowers, and of course, Arik Gilbert, it's a lot to like on paper as we gear up for what this Georgia offense might look like in 2022. I know we're talking a lot of SEC, so let's move to the Big Ten. Obviously, the Big Ten grabs a ton of headlines, but this quote certainly grabbed a ton of them. Ryan Day, head coach Ohio State, thinks the 2021 season was a failure. Quote, maybe at some places, 11-2 with a Rose Bowl victory is a good year. It isn't at Ohio State. End quote. Coach Reed, I'm going to you for this one, man. Expectations are high for Ohio State, and apparently they didn't deliver.
Well, Ryan Day is right. It's not about the 11. It's about the 2. The expectation at Ohio State is national championship or bust. And it is especially the expectation that you beat Michigan, something that they have done for years. And this was the first year that they got tripped up. That's not going to make anybody in Columbus is happy. Ryan Day is correct. Everybody expects them to win national championships. There's 3 or 4 programs in the country that if they don't win at all, they do see it as a failure. He's trying to have his own stamp and legacy on that program after taking over for Urban Meyer. And so Ohio State has their sights set on a national championship, but they don't take well in Ohio, in the state of Ohio, with losing to Michigan. Ryan Day is absolutely right. He really didn't even need to say it. Everybody in the state of Ohio knows what the marching orders are. And when they say the marching orders, that M is a letter that they don't pronounce in the state of Ohio.
Yeah, Carl's right. It's national championship or bust, or at least get to the national championship game and give yourself the opportunity to win it. I think Ryan Day probably has to be looking in the mirror a lot and just kicking himself for not making a change on defense last year. That's what cost them last year. Their offense was elite. They had, unstoppable offense at times with tons of playmakers, but their defense let them down. You saw cracks the year before in their defense, and you just kind of brush it off thinking it wasn't a deal, but it was a failure on his part to not make a change on defense. He made the change this year. Ohio State's going to be much better for it, and I expect them to be in the national championship game at the end of the season.
I'm a massive fan of Ryan Day, and it's because of stuff exactly like this. He's not afraid to point out flaws, whether it's in the game or with his own team and actions. He's right, and he knows that Ohio State could have done a lot more in 2021, but changes have been made, and I think Ohio State will meet expectations in 2022. Speaking of expectations in 2022, our own Brad Crawford at 24/7 Sports has projected the first preseason AP top 25 poll. And I want to know, going to you first, Carl, anything that caught your eye, maybe you disagree with here?
I think we have Texas extremely too high. And I know everybody's excited about Texas. I know everybody thinks that they're going to come and run through the division. But this was a team last year that had a losing record. They were 5-7 a year ago, and we're talking about them like they're going to win the national championship. We're talking about Quinn Ewers, who didn't play at Ohio State last year. He hasn't played since high school. Went to Ohio State, sat on the bench, and we're talking about him like he's going to win the Heisman. Before we get so excited about Texas, let's see him win some games first. And not just the marquee games. I'm not even talking about can you beat Alabama, but you're talking about a team who lost to Kansas. You're talking about a team who blew a huge lead to Oklahoma. Like before we get to crowning the University of Texas and saying they are here, they're going to have to show me that they can go out on the field and get it done. They have not been a dominant team in the Big 12 in quite some time. I think 2009 is the last time that Texas has won the Big 12 championship. I know everybody thinks the state of Texas is the king of football. Those fans go crazy. Every year I hear Texas, 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 Texas. Then the season comes and it's.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with you, Carl. I know Texas is getting a lot of hype this year. I will say a lot of the things I see on Texas, they do have probably a 50% different looking team this year. On paper, they look a lot better. I got to see it on the field before I believe it too much, but I agree with you. I think if they maximize their potential and all the players that they brought in, are great players, then we'll see. But until they do it on the field, I'm kind of with Carl. I want to see them do it first before I believe the hype. I am looking at this. I see a couple of teams that I think are too high, but Notre Dame to me is a team that I think is too high at 6. I think there's a lot of questions at Notre Dame, mainly at their quarterback position. That's the position I look at more offensively than defensively for them. I think, who are going to be their go-to wide receivers. They're going to have a running back come in and be productive like they've had the last few years. I think their offensive line is going to be really good, but quarterback and wide receiver worry me at Notre Dame this year. I think their defense will be in good shape, but we'll find out week 1 against Ohio State because they got a tough task. Unlikely that they win that game, in my opinion, but if they can rebound from that and put some games together where they look good, then we'll see. But I think 6 is too high for Notre Dame.
One thing I'm going to tell you guys, we always talk about how teams look on paper, rosters change, but if I hand you this, right, and write national championships on it, it don't mean nothing. You got to absolutely go out on the field and win the game.
All right. I like the interesting toss of the paper in there. Let's see what else we can get throughout the week as we gear up for fall camp. All right, guys, I want to close with this. 4-star and top 247, top 100 quarterback Austin Novosad is sticking with his commitment to Baylor. Now, I want to start by saying this. We know my very public man crush on Dave Aranda, so I'm going to remove myself from this conversation and go ahead and go to you first, Blake. What does this say about Dave Aranda as the head coach of the Baylor Bears, and what does this mean for Baylor? Could they be set up to dominate in a post-Texas and Oklahoma Big 12 conference?
Yeah, Baylor's got all the pieces that you're looking for. Quarterback position last year was not a position of strength, in my opinion, for them. I think Aranda has built an amazing culture in Waco. Everyone likes him. He's a savant on defense. He's an incredible coach, incredible person. The coaches love coaching for him. The players love playing for him. And I think, the sky's the limit in Waco. I mean, they've got some great teams coming in. I like the change that they made at quarterback this year. I think their defense will be fine. I think Baylor's got a chance as good as anybody to win the Big 12. So I really like what he's doing in Waco. Aranda is a guy. I said it last year. I wished LSU had hired him as their head coach. I thought that would have been an incredible hire for them, but he's not high profile enough for some of these big schools. But all he's going to do in Waco is win.
I think it shows a couple of things. It shows the leadership of Dave Aranda, and we've gushed over him on this show several times. We all believe that he's an excellent leader and that he's the perfect guy for that job and what he's trying to build there. It also shows me intelligence by the player. A lot of these kids fall in love with recruiting. They go visit after visit. They commit and they still take visits. They commit and then they decommit. At every position, but especially the quarterback, there is a high level of intelligence at finding your fit and finding a school and a system that you think that you can have success in and developing in it. That is always, in most cases, the best way. And I think it shows a high level of intelligence. With Oklahoma and Texas leaving the Big 12, Baylor is well positioned to take that conference over with Dave Aranda. But I think that he continues to win recruiting battles like this, and the sky is the limit for the Baylor Bears.
And I like what they're doing in recruiting as well. They're really focusing on the trenches. They've got some really good offensive linemen, defensive linemen committed. I know that they're very picky on kids that they recruit. If you come to Baylor and the first thing you're talking about is NIL and what can you do for me and pay me, that will be your last visit to Waco. So I think Aranda is very particular on the kids that he commits, the culture that he's building. And I really like what he's doing, and I'm not surprised that he's having success the way he is so far.
They've got the quarterback, they've got the trench play, and they go height, weight, speed on defense. And at the end of the day, they're always going to recruit high-level kids. And of course, they have a high-level staff. I'm very excited about the trajectory of the Baylor Bears under a one Dave Aranda, but I didn't need to tell you that for you to know it. Now, I need to tell you at home, go ahead, like, share, subscribe, help us build up the block. We're having a ton of fun, and we are just around the corner from football season. We are excited to go through it with you right here on the block. Check these two out on Twitter, then head to 247sports.com for all things college football. Gentlemen, it's always fun.